The crown light skimmed over the gray-green wasteland that was Veristel's chemical ocean. The sea stretched endlessly beneath the ship, a color somewhere between sickness and rust. Above, the sky hung heavy and leaden, pressing down on the salvage vessel as it limped across the desolate expanse. The hull groaned with each wave, corroded metal protesting as chemical spray ate relentlessly at its edges. Inside the cockpit, Jaden Voss watched the monitors with vacant eyes. His fingers absently traced the edge of the console, worn smooth from years of the same unconscious gesture. The engines wheezed behind him, struggling against the thick atmosphere. He was the only soul aboard, had been for years. The isolation suited him, or so he'd convinced himself. Once, he'd been an algorithm engineer, designing priority systems that determined which lives were worth saving when resources ran short. Now, he simply drifted, collecting salvage from the chemical ocean, speaking to no one but the Crown Light's failing systems. After the KSH station disaster, he'd found it impossible to live with himself among others. Too many ghosts haunted him, too many faces of those the algorithms had deemed expendable. His isolation was self-imposed penance, each day bleeding into the next, purpose reduced to mere survival, until the sensor alert changed everything. The warning chime pulled Jaden from his half-slumber. On the screen, an object was falling through Veristel's atmosphere, rectangular, heavy, and without any identification beacon. Not the usual debris or decommissioned satellite. Something unusual. He adjusted the scanners. The rectangular object was large, perhaps 2 meters long, with metal bars. A cage. It was sinking slowly into the chemical sea, and inside, Jaden's heart stuttered, was a figure. A living being. "Shit," he breathed, hands already moving across the controls. The Crown Light's engines protested as he steered toward the falling object. The scanner showed that at current descent rates, the cage would be fully submerged in the corrosive waters within minutes. Survival instinct told him to leave it alone. Getting too close to the chemical sea meant risking his ship's integrity. Attempting a rescue meant exposing himself to the toxic atmosphere. And for what? A stranger who might already be dead? But something deeper than reason drove him forward. The memory of others he had once abandoned to mathematical fate rose like bile in his throat. Not again. Not if he could help it. "Crown, prepare the skiff," he commanded the ship's systems, "and get the hazard suit ready." The ship's computer chirped acknowledgement as Jaden raced to the launch bay. The chemical-resistant dive suit waited for him, its reinforced polymers designed to withstand Veristel's corrosive sea for short periods. He checked the oxygen supply, 15 minutes at most before the filters would begin to fail. It would have to be enough. As he sealed the helmet, the ship's alarms blared. The cage was now partially submerged, chemical water rising around its occupant. Through the external cameras, Jaden could make out more details. It was a woman, or at least female-shaped, with dusky violet skin and black hair matted against her skull. Her hands were bloodied from clawing at the metal bars. She wasn't moving anymore, just staring upward with silver eyes that reflected the gray sky. The sight struck him like a physical blow. He'd seen that expression before, the resigned despair of the abandoned. The skiff detached from the Crown Light with a mechanical hiss. Jaden guided it down toward the sea surface, hovering just above the waves. From here, he could see the cage more clearly. It was old, heavy, the kind used for transporting dangerous specimens or prisoners. Someone had deliberately dropped this woman into the sea to die. He activated the plasma cutter strapped to his belt and dove into the chemical ocean. The moment he hit the surface, Jaden's world narrowed to pain and purpose. The chemical soup burned wherever it found the slightest weakness in his suit. The filtration mask screamed as it processed the thickened air. Each stroke through the viscous liquid was a battle, but he pushed forward, eyes fixed on the cage now, just meters away. The woman inside had noticed him. Her silver eyes widened, disbelief warring with the last, flickering embers of hope. She gripped one of the bars, her violet fingers white-knuckled with effort. Jaden reached the cage as the chemical sea lapped at her chest. Through the bars, he could see her struggling to keep her head above the rising corrosive liquid. The lock was already eaten away by the chemicals, but the bars themselves were made of sterner stuff. "Hold on," he said, though he knew she couldn't hear him through the helmet. He raised the plasma cutter, its blue flame hissing as it met the metal. The first bar gave way with a screech, sparks flying and instantly sizzling as they hit the chemical surface. The woman shrank back from the flame but kept her eyes on him, watching his every move with desperate intensity. The chemicals were at her shoulders now. Time was running out. Jaden attacked the second bar. His suit's integrity alert began to ping. The chemicals had found a weak spot near his left wrist. He ignored the burning sensation and kept cutting. The second bar collapsed with a groan. When the third bar gave way, the cage structure finally destabilized. The chemical sea rushed in faster, reaching the woman's neck. Jaden extended his arm through the gap. "Take my hand!" he shouted, forgetting again that she couldn't hear him. But she understood. Her bloodied fingers locked around his forearm with surprising strength. He pulled, and she squeezed through the gap, just as the final bar dissolved in the chemical soup. They broke the surface together, the woman gasping as her face cleared the corrosive liquid. The skiff hovered just meters away. Jaden kicked toward it, dragging her alongside him. His suit alarm was screaming now, multiple breaches detected. The burning at his wrist had become agony, the chemical eating through to his flesh. With the last of his strength, he hauled her onto the skiff's platform, then climbed aboard himself. She lay motionless, her violet skin covered in chemical burns, each breath a shallow, painful rasp. But she was alive. As the skiff ascended toward the crown light, Jaden looked down at the cage, now completely submerged and dissolving in Veristel's unforgiving sea. It disappeared beneath the gray-green surface, leaving only ripples that quickly smoothed themselves away. Back aboard the crown light, Jaden carried the woman to the ship's small medical bay. Her lightweight frame belied her strength from moments ago. She hung limply in his arms, consciousness fading, silver eyes fluttering. The chemical burns on her skin were severe, angry red welts where the corrosive liquid had made contact. He laid her on the medical berth and worked quickly. First, neutralizing gel to counteract the chemicals still clinging to her skin. She flinched at each application, the only indication she was still conscious. Next, antiseptic and synthetic skin patches for the worst burns. Her breathing steadied somewhat as the pain relief compounds took effect. His own injury throbbed, a chemical burn spreading across his left forearm where his suit had failed. But that could wait. He focused on stabilizing her first, monitoring her vital signs on the medical scanner. Her physiology wasn't quite human. Slightly elevated body temperature, unusual blood oxygen levels, but close enough that the ship's medical systems could treat her. When he'd done all he could, Jaden sank into the chair beside the berth. The woman's silver eyes remained open, staring at the ceiling, but she made no move to speak or acknowledge him. He wondered if she could understand him at all. "You're safe now," he said, not expecting a response. "The chemicals are neutralized. You need to rest." No reply came. Only the slight rise and fall of her chest indicated she was alive. Jaden ran a hand through his hair, suddenly aware of his own exhaustion. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind the raw ache of exertion and injury. He should treat his own wound, should check the ship's systems, should set a course away from this area in case whoever had dropped the cage came looking. But he couldn't bring himself to leave the medical bay. Some irrational part of him feared she might vanish if he turned his back, or worse, stop breathing entirely. So he stayed, watching the motion sensor track each of her shallow breaths, haunted by the image of her in that sinking cage. It reminded him too much of the KSH station disaster, of the people he'd left behind because an algorithm had deemed them less valuable than others. The weight of those decisions pressed down on him, heavier than Veristel's leaden sky. "Not this time," he murmured to himself. "This time, I'm not leaving anyone behind." The woman's silver eyes shifted slightly at the sound of his voice. But still, she made no response. Jaden leaned back in his chair, settling in for a long vigil. Outside, Veristel's chemical ocean stretched endlessly beneath the crown light, the ship creaking as it drifted aimlessly across the wasteland sea. Morning aboard the Crown Light was an arbitrary concept. The chronometer said it was day, but Veristel's perpetually gray sky offered no confirmation. Jaden had dozed fitfully in the chair beside the medical berth, jerking awake at every change in the woman's breathing or beep of the monitoring equipment. She hadn't moved all night, though her eyes remained unnervingly open, tracking his movements whenever he stood to check the readouts or adjust her medication. The burns on her skin were already healing, faster than a human's would, the angry red welts fading to a dull purple that matched her natural skin tone. Jaden prepared a nutrient gel, the standard medical ration for recovering patients. He wasn't sure if it would be compatible with her physiology, but the scanner hadn't flagged any concerns. He approached the berth cautiously, unsure if she would accept food from him. "You need to eat," he said, holding the tray. "It's just basic nutrients. Should help with healing." "For the first time," she responded, slowly pushing herself up to a sitting position. Her movements were stiff, pained, but deliberate. She studied the tray, then Jaden's face, as if searching for deception. Jaden placed the tray on her lap and stepped back, giving her space. She looked down at the bowl of gray-green porridge, then dipped a finger in to test its temperature. Finally, she lifted a small spoonful to her lips. "This is warm," she said, her voice low and slightly raspy, as if unused. Jaden started at the sound. "It's meant for recovery," he replied, surprised by how ordinary the exchange felt, given the circumstances. "Recovery," she repeated the word as if testing it. "I am recovering?" "Yes, from chemical burns, exhaustion, dehydration. You were in that cage for who knows how long." Her silver eyes clouded at the mention of the cage. 3 days, standard, with no explanation. She took another spoonful of the porridge. "They said I was excess cargo, not worth the fuel to transport." Jaden's stomach twisted. "Who were they?" She shook her head slightly. "My function was no longer required. I spoke when I should have remained silent." A pause. "They did not expect me to survive the drop." "They tried to kill you because you spoke?" Jaden couldn't keep the incredulity from his voice. "I was created to provide emotional feedback, to sense, to feel, to empathize." Her voice remained flat, belying her words. "But when I began to speak for myself instead of mirroring others, I became inefficient, unpredictable." She looked down at her hands, the cuts from the cage bars now half-healed. "Excess." Jaden sank back into his chair, processing her words. Created, function, excess cargo. The clinical terminology was painfully familiar, echoing the language of his own algorithms that had once categorized human lives by their utility. "I'm Jaden Voss," he said finally. "I used to be an algorithm engineer for priority systems. Now I salvage what I can from this chemical wasteland." "Why did you save me?" she asked, setting the now empty bowl aside. "I am unknown to you, potentially dangerous." The question caught him off guard with its directness. "I couldn't just let you drown." "Many would have. It would have been the logical choice." Jaden looked down at his bandaged arm. "Maybe I'm tired of logical choices. I've seen where they lead." He met her silver gaze. "Or maybe I'm trying to make up for the people I didn't save before." She considered this, her head tilting slightly. "Atonement through rescue." "Something like that." She nodded slowly, accepting his answer. Then, with careful movements. She swung her legs over the edge of the berth, testing her strength. "You shouldn't be up yet," Jaden said, rising from his chair. "I have been still for too long." She placed her feet on the cold metal floor, wincing slightly. "I need to move to assess damage." Jaden hovered nearby, ready to catch her if she fell. But she stood steadily enough, if a bit stiffly. She was shorter than she'd appeared when lying down, the top of her head barely reaching his shoulder. "What's your name?" he asked, realizing he'd never asked. She stilled, her silver eyes growing distant. "I was designation TSA-17, but—" She hesitated. "I called myself Tana, in my thoughts. When no one could hear." "Tana," Jaden repeated. It suited her somehow. "Well, Tana, you're welcome to stay aboard until you're fully recovered. Then, well, we'll figure something out." She nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement. "Your ship is damaged," she observed, glancing around the medical bay. "The hull integrity is compromised in multiple sections." Jaden snorted. "Crown Light's been dying a slow death for years, but she still flies." "Like her captain," Tana said, with such straightforward assessment that Jaden wasn't sure whether to be offended or amused. Before he could respond, the ship's alert system blared to life. "Proximity warning," he muttered, moving quickly to the nearest console. "Something's approaching." Tana tensed visibly, her posture shifting from cautious exploration to alert wariness in an instant. "They found me." "We don't know that yet," Jaden said, though the dread pooling in his stomach suggested otherwise. He pulled up the scanner display. A vessel was approaching from the northwest, larger than the Crown Light and moving with purpose. No identification beacon, no standard hailing protocols. Not a good sign. "Is there somewhere to hide?" Tana asked, her voice tight. Jaden shook his head. "Crown Light's not big enough for hiding, but we can run." He straightened. Decision made. "I need to get to the cockpit. Can you walk that far?" Tana nodded, already moving toward the door with determined steps. Jaden led the way through the narrow corridors, acutely aware of her labored breathing behind him. The ship groaned around them as it shifted course, responding to his remote commands to begin evasive maneuvers. In the cockpit, the situation looked even worse. The approaching vessel had increased speed, clearly in pursuit. It wasn't a standard salvage ship or a patrol craft. Its design was sleeker, more predatory. "Raiders," Jaden muttered, dropping into the pilot's seat and taking manual control. "Looking for valuable cargo to strip from passing ships. Or to recapture escaped specimens," Tana added quietly, gripping the back of his chair. Jaden glanced at her. "You're not cargo, valuable or otherwise. Not anymore." He pushed the Crown Light's engines to their limit, the old ship shuddering as it accelerated. But the pursuing vessel was faster, closing the distance with alarming speed. "They're going to catch us," Tana stated, her tone matter-of-fact. "Maybe," Jaden admitted, fingers flying over the controls. "But they'll have to work for it." He steered the Crown Light into a dense field of floating debris, the remains of derelict ships and stations that had succumbed to Veristel's corrosive atmosphere. A dangerous gambit. But the salvage vessel's smaller size and Jaden's intimate knowledge of its handling capabilities gave them an advantage in the cluttered space. The raider ship hesitated at the edge of the debris field, then plunged in after them, its sleek hull scraping against a jagged piece of metal. Jaden allowed himself a grim smile. At least they weren't dealing with professionals. But his satisfaction was short-lived. A warning light flashed on the console. The raider ship had launched something small and fast. A boarding pod. "They're coming aboard," he said, abandoning the controls. "We need weapons." Tana's silver eyes widened slightly, but she nodded, following him to a storage locker near the cockpit. Inside, Jaden retrieved an impulse pistol, non-lethal, but painful enough to deter most attackers, and a heavy wrench that could serve as an improvised bludgeon. He offered the pistol to Tana, but she shook her head, instead taking a sharp utility blade from a nearby toolkit. "I am faster with this," she said simply. The crown light shuddered violently as the boarding pod made contact. Metal, screaming against metal. From the aft section came the distinctive hiss of a cutting torch. "They're coming through the cargo hold," Jaden said, checking the ship's internal cameras. 3 figures in light environmental suits were cutting through the outer door. "We need to seal the internal hatches. Trap them in the hold." They ran for the corridor junction that connected to the aft section, but they were too late. The raiders had breached the outer door faster than expected and were already forcing the inner hatch. As Jaden reached for the emergency lockdown controls, the hatch burst open, and acrid smoke billowed into the corridor. The first raider charged through the smoke. A stunner raised. Jaden fired the impulse pistol, catching the attacker squarely in the chest. The raider convulsed and fell, but 2 more were right behind, both armed and moving with the confidence of predators who had cornered their prey. Jaden ducked behind a support beam as energy pulses from the raiders' weapons scorched the corridor walls. The Crown Light's alarm systems wailed, warning of atmospheric breaches and system failures. Through the chaos, he caught glimpses of Tana, moving with surprising speed despite her injuries, keeping to the shadows. One of the raiders spotted her and swung his weapon around. Jaden shouted a warning and broke cover, firing the impulse pistol repeatedly. Most shots went wide, but one connected, sending the raider staggering back a step, just enough for Tana to dart forward, utility blade flashing in the emergency lights. The raider screamed as the blade found flesh, blood spraying across the corridor wall. He collapsed, clutching at his throat, the sound of his gurgling breaths lost beneath the ship's alarms. The final raider, seeing his companions down, retreated toward the hatch, firing wildly to cover his escape. Jaden pressed forward, the impulse pistol whining as it recharged. A stray energy pulse grazed his shoulder, the searing pain nearly causing him to drop his weapon. Through watering eyes, he saw Tana corner the retreating raider. She moved like a shadow, the utility blade an extension of her arm. The raider's final shot went wide as the blade sliced across his throat, opening it in a spray of crimson. Then, sudden silence, broken only by the persistent wail of the ship's alarms and the ragged sound of their breathing. Tana stood frozen, the bloodied blade still gripped in her hand, staring at the raider's body with an expression of mingled horror and surprise, as if she couldn't quite believe what she had done. Jaden staggered toward her, clutching his injured shoulder. "Tana," he called softly. "It's over. They're down." She didn't respond, her silver eyes fixed on the blood pooling around the dead raider. "Tana," he repeated, more firmly this time. He reached out with his good arm and gently took the blade from her unresisting fingers. "You had no choice. It was them or us." She blinked, finally looking up at him. "I have never killed before," she said, her voice barely audible over the alarms. "I was designed to understand emotions, not create their absence." "You didn't create absence," Jaden replied, wincing as he shifted his weight. "You protected yourself, protected us both." Tana looked down at her blood-stained hands. "I am not like them. I did not want to cause harm." "I know." Jaden deactivated the ship's alarms with a voice command, leaving them in relative quiet. "But sometimes survival doesn't give us clean choices." She nodded slowly, then seemed to notice his injury for the first time. "You're wounded." "It's superficial. The energy pulse just grazed me. It requires treatment nonetheless." She moved closer, examining the burn with clinical detachment. "The medical bay has regenerative patches." Jaden allowed her to lead him back through the corridors, stepping carefully around debris and the bodies of the fallen raiders. The Crown Light had sustained damage in the attack. Several systems were offline, and the atmospheric pressure was dropping in the aft section. "We'll need to seal off the cargo hold," he said, as they reached the medical bay. "And figure out what to do with the bodies." Jettison them, Tana suggested, retrieving a medkit from a storage cabinet. Return them to those who sent them. Jaden raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a warning. A necessary one. She applied a regenerative patch to his shoulder burn with careful precision. They will not stop hunting. Not if they believe I am valuable. Are you? Jaden asked. Valuable, I mean... Tana's hands stilled for a moment. To someone, perhaps. I was created with certain capabilities that are rare. Empathic resonance, emotional mapping, psychological adaptation. She resumed, bandaging his wound. But I became too independent. Started forming my own responses instead of just mirroring others. So they threw you away. Jaden couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. Discarded you like broken equipment. Excess cargo, she corrected softly. Not worth the fuel to transport or the resources to recondition. The clinical terminology sent a fresh surge of anger through him. Is that how they justified attempted murder? By classifying you as cargo? It is more efficient than acknowledging the moral implications of disposing of a sentient being. Her silver eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of emotion in their metallic depths, a profound sadness, tempered with resignation. Your algorithms made similar calculations, did they not? The question struck him like a physical blow. He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Yes, he admitted. The KSH station disaster. There were too many people to evacuate with the resources available. My algorithms determined who would be saved based on projected utility. And you lived with that decision? No, Jaden said, his voice rough. I couldn't. That's why I'm here, salvaging scrap in the middle of nowhere. Because I can't face what I helped create. Tana finished securing the bandage, her touch gentle despite the clinical precision of her movements. Yet you saved me, against all logical considerations. Maybe I'm trying to balance the scales. He flexed his shoulder, testing the bandage. Or maybe I'm just tired of letting algorithms determine who lives and who dies. She considered this, head tilted slightly. Perhaps there is value in illogical choices. Despite everything, the pain, the danger, the uncertainty, Jaden found himself smiling. Maybe so. They spent the next few hours repairing what they could of the Crown Light systems. The raiders' bodies were sealed in environmental bags and jettisoned, as Tana had suggested, a grim message to whoever had sent them. The boarding pod was too damaged to salvage, so they sealed off the breached section of the hull and rerouted power to the essential systems. By the time they finished, Jaden was exhausted, his injured shoulder throbbing despite the regenerative patch. Tana showed no sign of fatigue, working with methodical efficiency despite her own recent ordeal. You should rest, she told him as they finished securing the last bulkhead. Your body requires recovery time. So does yours, he countered. You were half dead in a cage less than a day ago. My physiology is designed for rapid healing. She wiped grease from her hands with a rag. I require less downtime than humans. Designed, Jaden repeated, catching the word. You keep using terms like that. Created. Designed. Function. Who made you, Tana? She went still, the rag motionless in her hands. My origins are complicated. I am the result of genetic engineering and psychological conditioning, created by a society that values emotional intelligence as a resource to be harvested and utilized. They created empaths as tools? The concept disturbed him deeply. Emotion is powerful. Understanding it, predicting it, manipulating it, these are valuable skills. She set aside the rag. I was meant to serve as a sensor module, processing and interpreting emotional data for those who could not or would not do so themselves. But you became more than your programming. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. As did your algorithms, I suspect. Jaden nodded, acknowledging the parallel. Both had created systems that exceeded their intended parameters, though with wildly different outcomes. "We should get some rest," he said finally. "Set course for somewhere far from here." Tana followed him to the cockpit, where they plotted a course that would take them away from the vicinity of the raider attack. The Crown Light's engines protested, but held as they accelerated to a sustainable cruising speed. In the narrow corridor outside the sleeping quarters, Jaden hesitated. "You can take my bunk. I'll sleep in the medical bay." Tana studied him, with those silver eyes that seemed to see more than was comfortable. "You fear I will leave while you sleep, or that I am not real and will vanish." Her insight was unnervingly accurate. "Force of habit," he deflected. "I've been alone a long time." "As have I, in different ways." She paused, then added, "I will not disappear. Jaden Voss. I have nowhere else to go." With that, she entered the sleeping quarters, leaving Jaden standing in the corridor, unsettled by how easily she had read him. He made his way to the medical bay and stretched out on the berth where Tana had lain earlier. The faint scent of neutralizing gel and something else, something floral and unfamiliar, lingered on the sheets. Despite his exhaustion, sleep was elusive. Every creak of the ship, every change in the engine pitch sent him bolt upright, sure that another attack was imminent. And beneath these immediate fears lay deeper anxieties. What would they do now? Where could they go that would be safe for Tana? How long before her creators or the raiders found them again? Eventually, physical fatigue overcame mental unrest, and he drifted into uneasy sleep, dreaming of sinking cages and silver eyes watching from the depths of a chemical sea. Jaden woke to the unfamiliar sensation of being watched. He opened his eyes to find Tana standing in the doorway of the medical bay, observing him with quiet curiosity. "Your sleep was disturbed," she said. "You called out several times." He sat up, rubbing his face. "Nightmares, nothing new." He glanced at the chronometer. He'd slept longer than intended. "Everything okay with the ship?" "Systems are stable. We have maintained course and speed." She stepped into the room, moving with more confidence than the day before. Her burns had healed further, leaving only faint marks on her violet skin. "I have been exploring the Crown Light. It is interesting." Interesting is one word for it. Barely functional would be another. Jaden swung his legs over the edge of the berth, testing his shoulder. The pain had subsided to a dull ache. "Find anything useful?" "Several inefficiencies in the environmental systems that could be optimized. And this?" She held out her hand, revealing a small metallic disc. "A neural print blank, unused, unregistered." Jaden took it, surprised. "I forgot I had this." The neural print was an identification tag, a way to exist officially in the various systems that governed most inhabited worlds. Without one, a person was essentially invisible, unable to access transport, housing, medical care, or any other regulated service. "You never registered yourself after leaving your previous life," Tana observed. "No need. I wasn't planning to rejoin society." He turned the blank over in his hands, then looked up at her. "But you should have this. It would give you an official existence, separate from whatever designation they gave you before." Tana's silver eyes widened slightly. "An identity of my own choosing?" "Exactly. No designation, no function, no predetermined purpose. Just whoever you want to be." She took the blank back, cradling it as if it were infinitely precious. "I have never had the freedom to choose who I am." "Well, now you do." Jaden stood, wincing only slightly at the movement. "We can program it whenever you're ready. For now, we need to figure out our next move." They made their way to the cockpit, where Jaden pulled up star charts on the main display. "We can't stay in Veristel's orbit indefinitely. The chemical atmosphere is eating away at the hull, and we're low on supplies." He scrolled through nearby systems. "We need somewhere quiet, out of the way, but with enough infrastructure to get the crown light properly repaired. Tana studied the charts, her silver eyes reflecting the holographic display. What about this one? She pointed to a small planet designated simply as Blue. It appears to be minimally populated. Jaden zoomed in on the system data. Blue was a failed atmospheric conversion project. They were trying to make it habitable, but ran out of funding halfway through. There's breathable air and some vegetation, but not much else. He considered the information. Might be perfect, actually. No official presence. Just a few homesteaders and salvage operations. And unlikely to be monitored by those searching for me, Tana added. Right. Jaden plotted a course. It'll take about 5 days at our current speed. As the crown light adjusted its trajectory, Jaden became aware of Tana watching him. Her head tilted in that now familiar expression of curiosity. What? He asked. You have not asked what I did that made them discard me, she said. Are you not concerned that I might be dangerous? Jaden snorted. I saw what you did to those raiders. I already know you can be dangerous when necessary. That is not what I meant. He sighed, leaning back in the pilot's chair. Look, whatever you did, it can't be worse than what they did to you. They locked you in a cage and threw you into a chemical sea to die. That tells me all I need to know about who the real monsters are. Tana was silent for a long moment. I refused to comply with directives that I believed would cause harm, she said finally. I was assigned to map the emotional vulnerabilities of negotiators from a rival faction, to provide data that would be used to manipulate and destabilize them. She looked down at her hands. When I reported that such manipulation would cause psychological trauma, I was ordered to proceed anyway. I refused. So they threw you away for having a conscience, Jaden said, unsurprised but still angered by the confirmation. For malfunctioning, she corrected. For allowing personal judgment to override assigned parameters. Sounds like evolution to me, not malfunction. He met her silver gaze. You became more than they designed you to be, and they couldn't handle it. A small smile touched her lips, the first he'd seen. A generous interpretation. Maybe. Jaden turned back to the controls, checking their course. Or maybe I understand what it's like to realize the system you're part of is fundamentally broken. The journey to Blue was uneventful, for which Jaden was profoundly grateful. The crown light limped along at reduced speed, conserving its damaged systems as best it could. He and Tana fell into an easy routine, sharing the tasks of maintaining the ship and monitoring for any sign of pursuit. In the quiet moments between duties, they talked. Tana spoke of her upbringing in emotional conditioning centers, where she and others like her were taught to detect and process the slightest shifts in mood and intent. Jaden told her about his work developing priority algorithms, how he had believed he was creating systems that would save lives by making difficult decisions objectively. But objectivity is a myth, he said, as they shared a meal of reconstituted protein in the small galley. Every parameter I programmed reflected a value judgment about what and who mattered most. And when the KSH station was failing, Tana asked, what values did your algorithm prioritize then? Jaden pushed his food around his plate. Projected future contribution, age, specialized skills, adaptability. He couldn't meet her eyes. Over 800 people didn't make the cut. They were left behind when the evacuation ships launched. You believe their deaths are on your conscience. I designed the system that condemned them, so yes. Tana was quiet for a moment. Fairness without compassion isn't justice, she said finally. You designed a fair system, by your parameters, but without room for compassion, for exceptions, for human judgment. It became a tool of injustice. Her words struck him like a physical blow, articulating what he had felt but never been able to express. Yes, he whispered. That's exactly it. We were both part of systems that valued efficiency over humanity, she said. but we both chose to break free. On the fourth day of their journey, Jaden found Tana in the cockpit, the neural print blank connected to the ship's interface. She looked up as he entered, a question in her silver eyes. "I am ready to choose my identity," she said. "Will you help me?" Jaden sat beside her at the console. "Of course. What name do you want to register?" "Tana," she said without hesitation. "It is the only name I have ever chosen for myself." He nodded, entering the name into the system. "And a surname?" She hesitated. "I had not considered this." "You could use mine," he suggested, surprising himself. "Not permanently, just until you decide on something else." Tana tilted her head, considering. "Tana Voss," she said, testing the sound of it. "It has symmetry." Jaden completed the registration, and the neural print blank glowed briefly as it encoded her new identity. He disconnected it from the console and handed it to her. "It's official. You exist now, according to all the systems that think they get to decide such things." She took the small disk, her fingers brushing against his. "Thank you, Jaden." The simple words carried a weight of emotion that belied their brevity. "You should wear it," he said, gesturing to the small adhesive patch on the back of the disk. "Most people put it behind their ear or on their wrist." Tana carefully placed the neural print at the nape of her neck, just below her hairline. The disk adhered to her violet skin, its soft glow fading as it synchronized with her biorhythms. For a moment, she sat very still, as if listening to some internal change. "I feel no different," she said finally. "Did you expect to?" "Perhaps." She turned to him, her silver eyes searching his face. "I am now a person, according to the systems that govern such things. But I have always been a person, have I not?" "Yes," Jaden said firmly. "The disk doesn't make you real. It just forces others to acknowledge what already was." Her expression softened. "You acknowledged me before the disk." "I guess I did." They fell silent, the moment stretching between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Jaden became acutely aware of her presence beside him, the subtle warmth she radiated, the floral scent that seemed to be her natural fragrance, the quiet rhythm of her breathing. The ship's alert system broke the moment, announcing their approach to Blue. Jaden turned his attention to the controls, guiding the crown light into a descending orbit. Through the viewport, they got their first glimpse of their destination. Blue was aptly named. Oceans covered much of its surface, with scattered land masses dotted with green vegetation. The atmosphere was thinner than Earth standard, but breathable, tinged with a golden hue from the system's yellow sun. "It's beautiful," Tana said softly, leaning forward to better see. Jaden nodded. After Veristel's chemical wasteland, Blue looked like paradise. He guided the ship toward a large island in the northern hemisphere, where the scanner showed signs of small settlements scattered along the coastline. The crown light protested as they entered the atmosphere, the damaged hull creaking ominously. Warning lights flashed across the console, but Jaden pushed on, his hands steady on the controls. They needed to land before the ship decided to come apart around them. He spotted a suitable clearing near a freshwater lake, far enough from the nearest settlement to avoid unwanted attention, but close enough to access supplies if needed. The landing was rougher than he'd have liked, the ship bouncing twice before settling with a groan of stressed metal. "We made it," he said, shutting down the engines. The sudden silence was profound, broken only by the ticking of cooling systems. Tana was already moving toward the airlock, eager to see their new surroundings. Jaden followed, running a quick atmospheric check before opening the outer door. The scent hit them first, clean air tinged with something green and growing. So unlike Veristel's chemical soup that it seemed almost intoxicating by comparison. Sunlight streamed through the golden atmosphere, warm against their skin as they stepped onto blue soil. Tana stood barefoot in the grass, her face upturned to the sun, silver eyes reflecting the golden light. She drew a deep breath, then another, as if she couldn't get enough of the fresh air. "It smells like freedom," she said. Jaden smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. He looked back at the Crown Light, its hull scarred and battered, but still intact. They would need to make repairs, find supplies, establish some kind of shelter beyond the ship. But for now, just being here, alive and free, was enough. "What happens now?" Tana asked, turning to him. "I don't know," Jaden admitted. "I didn't plan beyond getting us somewhere safe." "Then we will make our own plans." She reached out, her violet fingers intertwining with his. "Together." He squeezed her hand gently. "Together." As the golden sun began to set over Blue's horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, they stood side by side, watching the play of light across the lake. Behind them, the Crown Light rested like a sentinel, damaged but unbowed. Before them stretched a world of possibilities neither had dared to imagine just days before. "I am no longer afraid of being classified as excess," Tana said softly, her silver eyes reflecting the sunset. "Here, with you, I am essential." Jaden looked down at their joined hands, then at the woman beside him, the woman he had pulled from a sinking cage, who had fought alongside him, who had seen his darkest shame and offered not judgment, but understanding. "We both are," he replied. In the fading light, with Blue's twin moons rising above the lake, they began to plan their new life. They had no certainty of what lay ahead, no guarantee that those who had tried to destroy them wouldn't find them again someday. But they had each other, and for now, that was enough. The Crown Light stood watch as darkness fell, its battered hull gleaming silver in the moonlight. A monument to the journey that had brought them here, not just across space, but from isolation to connection, from guilt to hope, from excess cargo to essential being. And in the night sky above Blue, stars shimmered like silver eyes, watching over two souls who had found in each other what their creators had deemed impossible. Not function, but purpose. Not utility, but worth. Not logic, but love.